from the European Commission in Brussels. I've been over there and we talked about it. I've got a positive response from the Equality and Human Rights Commission, and I believe that what he's doing is in breach of the European Directive.
Is this the only thing that is book protection that has been removed, or a lot of other things, and this is just one of the side effects?
It's breathtakingly complicated, but that I think is the most spectacular one. There's another one, which is that we're into this new ballpark of schools moving away from local authority control into academies, and these are things that are happening as a result of that. We're having a eyeball by eyeball argument about voluntary controlled schools, where in theory the protection, oddly for that, has been moved across, but there's a weasel provision saying that if the Secretary of State doesn't feel like it, he won't do it, he or she, but in parliamentary terms he won't do it. And the guidance notes as to when the Secretary of State will exercise this option appear to be every time. So so that's really that's another major potential problem.
Can you give a very brief outline of Gove's response to you on this specific point?
Oh yes.
I mean, it must be.
Yes, absolutely. It is wonderful. Responding to a letter from that we put them so much under pressure last week that they actually issued a statement. Not right back to their mission issued a public statement, and it's very sweet. It says, responding to a letter from the National Secular Society that the Secretary of State shared with the media about the protection of non-religious staff in faith schools, a Department of Education spokeswoman said, "We are disappointed with the misleading claims from the National Secular Society, brackets NSS. The clause highlighted by the NSS is in fact there to ensure that the statutory rights of staff are protected when a school converts to academy status. The Education Bill does not reduce protections for teachers within faith schools that convert into academies, and we are confident that the bill does not breach any domestic or European law."
So you got it wrong.
Yes, and I ought really to be. I can bring my sackcloth and ashes and wail and all that kind of thing, except for the fact that I have the head of two letters now. One that went to Gove the first time, and another one in response to this pathetic statement, of which I was only part, from the head of public law of a city firm of solicitors that specialise in education. Absolutely top drawer. 2 3-page letters, one originally going to Gove, another in response to this statement, basically saying you couldn't be more wrong, and the idea that the NSS's letter was misleading is entirely unfounded, and by the way, your response is entirely misleading and unfortunately I couldn't get the lawyer to use the word disingenuous, perhaps he couldn't spell it, I don't know, but effectively it does say that. And selective. And yes, we're right, and certainly the European Commission, I think, thinks we're right. And it's their directive that I think is being broken. So I think we're far from shall we say, withdrawing from this fight. We've just turned the gas up a fair amount, and I've written back to Gove saying, we're going to release this statement on Tuesday, basically saying your statements are a load of rubbish from the lawyers, not from me. So that could be quite entertaining, particularly as the Education Bill is starting its committee stage quite shortly, and this will be a very useful time to do that. So we fight hard, and if any of you want to come and join us and show your support in any, shall I say, practical way, in joining us as members and or as volunteers, we would always be delighted to hear from you in such an intelligent audience from such a wonderful place. My favourite city, I think.
What's easiest for the people here? Get
Yes, of which the editor is sitting there.
Sorry, just a point. News 94 it is really good. It is just a quick look. It's really good.
That's a 12-page weekly newsletter. Comes out on Friday, and it's free. But obviously, we would like you all to become members and support us in this kind of work, where we punch. I think most people think fairly high above our weight.
Can I just point out that your battles are absolutely noble, and thanks for doing them on behalf of people that are not so politically aware and so on. But actually, you deal with the sort of the people in power. But there is a huge part, of course, obviously not resources wouldn't be easily diverted there. But the ordinary British people seem to think that the faith schools should be, they mean dismantling faith schools only when it's Jewish, the Muslim and so on. They wouldn't include the Church of England schools as faith schools. And when you said this statistic, 1/4 of the schools are faith schools, you meant including 1/3 of
Well, a third of them, a quarter, I mean, are Anglican, and a third overall are Anglican and Catholic.
Is that primary and secondary?
Yeah. Mainly primary, I have to say.
Right. So in a way, there is, if you persuade the mass that they have got their attachment to the Church of England schools, that seem to be the prevailing number, perhaps then you don't need to battle so badly with the politicians in a way. So actually the mass, when the mass decides that, okay, they don't need them, now they need them because they perceive them as better in quality.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because it occurred to me, I'm trying to kind of pass the point that I haven't made that, I haven't addressed that point, and I'm so glad you have. This idea that the schools are better, I mean, it's not entirely without basis, but the reason they're able to do that is that they have discriminatory provisions on admissions, and it's actually not so much being able to cream off the best as being able to keep out the disruptive, which is something.
Resources.
Yeah,
these
absolutely.
communities somehow pool resources, and somehow these schools get better staff, I suppose, and so on. So it's a vicious circle that is
It really is terrible.
feeding itself.
And so, of course, I suppose putting yourself in the position of some parents when the choice is getting quite close to a kind of almost public school on the rates, or a fee-paying school on the rates, and having to go and say a few Hail Marys or whatever it is you have to do to get it, it's worth the price, and I suppose most people would think it was.
Yeah, that's a good question about the first topic you raised, which was the business about the child abuse. Is there any prospect in this country, and if not in this country, in which country, of serious prosecutions being brought against preferably senior serving members of the church, of any of the churches, particularly Catholic Church, so that they actually get taken to court? Because I believe they've committed criminal offences.
On a spectacular scale.
Yeah. So why? I'm not talking about the paedophiles themselves.
No.
I'm talking about the people who deliberately kept it and had policies of keeping it. Why is nobody going to court over this? If it had been a murder or anything else, there's no statute.
Well, that's right. I mean, those statute limitations is a problem, and it's particularly a problem in Scotland. I mean, I've been helping a guy there who is probably most active in that area. They're trying to do civil prosecutions. It's actually against the priests themselves, but it's just a useful way of getting into this. And they can't do that because they need legal aid, and the legal aid people say you've got no chance because it's beyond the statute of limitations, which they don't call it that there, but that's what that's the English word.
So
phrase.
legal aid is really a red herring. I mean, I know there are many cases. I'd be prepared to put my money into all sorts of legal cases against big organisations, including government. So there are people who will put their hands in their pockets to see cases going to court.
Yeah. Well, it's starting in the States. I think one of the first cases actually was in the last few weeks. I don't know if Terry's going to help me out here. But do you remember that? There was a case of a Vicar General or someone who, this is actually last fortnight.
Yeah, actually there's been an attempt to bring the Vatican to account in America, because the Vatican always argues that it's the dioceses that are responsible. There's no corporate responsibility for the Catholic Church. And there's been several attempts to prosecute the Vatican for its, what should we say, neglect of these cases.
And that it was the puppet master, that point.
But several of these dioceses, the bishops have written to the Vatican and said, please relieve us of this abusing priest, and the Vatican has done nothing. And so their argument is that the Vatican is responsible, and attempts are being made, but of course international...
Well, yeah, no, this is what I mean, you must read, and it's very inexpensive, the Robertson's book, The Case of the Pope, because he takes this absolutely head on. And one of the problems is whether or not the Holy See is, or Vatican City State, is a state. And he says that under the Montevideo Convention, that it isn't, that it doesn't tick the boxes at all for being a state. But where you get to on all of this, so often is it doesn't actually matter what the legal definition of a state is. There are so many Catholics in high positions, in governments, in international organisations, that trying to do anything like that is an absolute non-starter. I mean, if I tell you that in Ireland, that, and we ain't finished yet, there's only one or two of the reports that come out. There are more reports going to come out like the Ryan report. And the church is stealing itself. But what we've seen already is just too dreadful. And the deal was, which is absolutely disgraceful, that the Irish government ended up paying 90%, I think it was, of the cost of the child abuse. It was done at a stage when it was much less was known about it, and there was a cash limit put on it. And so, with the equity, in inverted commas, in the balance, all going to the church, so sort of being paid for by the state. So it ended up being something like, I think it was 90%. And then I'll tell you, and that was done clearly because there were Catholics doing fifth column work in the government, arranging this stupid deal. Worse than that, they haven't paid any of it anyway. It was all done in, oh well, yes, will be land transfers at ridiculously inflated valuation. And apparently even that hasn't happened. You know, it's just, and now of course the value of the land's gone down even further. And so you get that kind of idea of...
Sorry, this is a very familiar pattern across lots of industry. You see health and safety issues and toxic dumping and so on. So that we've seen all of this where large institutions are trying to... If you get people who are in positions of power, preferably in positions of power now, actually prosecuted and sent to prison for breaking the existing law. That's what I'm asking. Why is this so difficult?
Well, it's because of the, what's the word when a state is protecting its state protection?
Yeah, I mean...
I'm not worried about the Vatican, and there are individuals who are subject to British law.
Yeah, I mean, some of them have been. Cardinal Law, who was responsible for the big Boston scandal, which set this whole ball rolling, he was actually, a subpoena was put out for his arrest, but he's now in the Vatican, beyond their reach. So, you know, he was going to be brought to justice.
So they took him to the Vatican and promoted him.
So he can't be brought to justice, and that's the way they do it. If it looks as though anybody's going to get their just desserts.
I suspect the answer is, although there are little cracks appearing more and more, that it's actually because the whole legal and governmental structure in so many countries is just trying so hard to protect them. I really do. And it's just breathtaking.
Last week, 2 German academics launched a case in the International Court to bring the Pope personally before it on charges of human rights rights abuses. But how realistic that is, I don't